Well, thanks for joining us again on another session of Meat Market Minutes. We're back for our Q1 version, kind of a year follow-up from our first set of videos. We've got faculty from around the southern region, a bunch of economists, and we're talking about what's happening in the meat markets. And this morning we're going to hear from Andrew Griffith from the University of Tennessee, and he's going to talk to us about what's going on in the lamb market. So Andrew, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Justin. I'm glad to be able to spend a few minutes talking about lamb and hopefully talk about the meat market a little bit that'll help folks better understand what's going on. Um, I always think that demand is the big driver of any of these meat markets. And as far as just lamb consumption, some of the things I've never heard of. You can sit there and read those little. I'm not saying there's not people that don't say I can't wait to smoke a rack of lamb, or a mutton burger. Boy, that sounds like a winner. I'm not saying that there's not people saying those things, but in in the circles that I run in, there's not a whole lot of people out looking for lamb and saying, well, why isn't the lamb in the grocery store? So that's a big factor in this country as far as lamb meat consumption is concerned. Just to kind of reiterate that, you can look here, and if we just say that total red meat consumption is 100 pounds on an annual basis, which it excuse me, it was over 110 pounds in 2020, and it's expected to be over 100 pounds in 2021. But if you think about that, and then you actually look at lamb and mutton uh, per capita disappearance on a retail weight basis, what you see there is that we're less than 1% uh, as far as total red meat uh, is concerned. So our consumers are primarily, pork and beef are going to be their primary red meat consumption pattern there, and there's just very very little lamb. And I know there's people that are on this video with me that eat lamb and probably eat it on a regular basis compared to most folks in the country. But there's just not a whole lot of people that eat a lot of lamb. You can see very well where lamb and mutton production had tracked very similarly across. Well, we would expect disappearance and production to track well, because if you produce it, it has to disappear, and disappearance doesn't necessarily mean it's consumed, but it does mean it exits the market. Uh, so some good signs for the lamb business. Cold storage is down. I really like to focus on cold storage when it comes to lamb. When it comes to pork and beef, cold storage to me is not that big of an issue. But when it comes to lamb, if I start to see things backing up in cold storage, then I start to get a little more concerned about what's going to happen in the feedlots out west for lamb. And if those animals start to back up, then they all of a sudden start turning into mutton. There's a fine line in producing lamb, and then is essentially maturity of the animal is what turns it into mutton. And so as long as lamb in cold storage is fairly manageable, fairly low, I feel pretty confident that we have animals moving through the feeding system at a good pace, or at a pace that will keep that as a high quality product. And so right now it's very very manageable. Um, Essentially a 30 to 40% reduction compared to January a year ago, and I don't see any reason right now for those values to increase very rapidly. Uh, we also at the same time seeing that much has been pulled out. There's a reason why that lamb has been pulled out of cold storage, and the reason why we keep on harvesting lambs and keeping meat moving is because the lamb cutout value has been very very strong compared to last year. Some things that are driving it. The shoulder is helping support that price, as can be seen in this graph. We're easily $40 a hundredweight over what it was a year ago, which is very very strong price type thing. Uh, Leg prices are pretty strong, and then you move into loin prices, which are very very strong. That could go back. The loin of most any animal is of high valued product. So it doesn't matter if it's, if you're talking about beef or you're talking about uh, pork, even people that, I mean, if somebody likes to deer hunt, the main thing they want to get out of it is the loin, right? And so what we realize is that loin is a really good driver, and it is very, very strong compared to a year ago. So my point is most of these cuts are helping support uh, the overall lamb cutout price. Uh, Rack prices don't appear to be just tremendously strong compared to a year ago, but in reality, they were really strong last year. So there's no reason to look at this graph and say, well, rack prices really aren't supporting the lamb cutout. Well, in reality, they are, because they have been very, very strong. They were strong last year, and they're strong again this year. So don't be disillusioned by the fact that the 2021 line overlays the 2020 price line. Then we just briefly look at imports. And so when we're looking at imports, we have increased imports slightly in 2020 over 2019, but I don't know, very, very minimal increase in doing that. So when we think about that from a standpoint of of total product to disappear, we haven't increased it from an import standpoint that greatly. So, in most cases, the people that are really consuming lamb in our country end up being the Hispanic, Latino, Middle Eastern, and Asian folks, and then David Anderson. Um, and so those are really the only people that consume lamb. But we do have a few domestic folks in the United States that are going to consume this product, and when we get right down to it, the lamb market is really strong right now, but we're going to have to continue to manage domestic supply to support those prices. We do produce a high quality lamb in the United States. You can think about places like New Zealand, who have very much grass-based systems, and we know through any type of feeding, it generally a concentrated feed, it does influence the quality of the meat, and so we produce a high quality lamb that domestic consumers do prefer. And I tell you, the few times I've eaten lamb, it is a great product. It is delicious. Sometimes it just prices me out of the market, and I would have a feeling that might be the case for other consumers. Um, in the United States. But with that, I will open it up if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Andrew. What kind of for the group? So we talk about in the corn market, this 40 days of use on hand is kind of being the trigger amount of corn that leads us to, higher prices, because it's harder to get the product where we need it. That's kind of the breaking point for sharply higher prices. We're at about 5 million head of sheep and lambs in the US right now. Do we think that is kind of what is suddenly leading to these sharper prices, right? Because you're not wrong. I eat some lamb, but I'm not eating volumes more in the last year than I normally have. And prices at the auction for sheep and goats has gone through the roof. So are we just reaching such low inventory levels that we've reached kind of that breaking point of we can't really go much lower without really affecting price really significantly?
I do think our reduced inventory in lamb is the main driver in what prices are doing. Um, and we essentially, what was discussed here is the commercial lamb market, right? The traditional lamb market that we think of out west. Whereas in the east, where Tennessee and Kentucky, we think over here, a lot of ours literally are they're coming straight out of auctions, and they're being slaughtered / harvested on somebody's outside the back door type thing, and so I think we have, from that national standpoint in that traditional market, we have started to see the reduced production lead to higher prices as far as cutout and retail prices are concerned. But we still have. I don't want. It's not a black market, right? But that gray market that we have that goes elsewhere. is a driver for many parts of the country, and most of the time that goes to those Hispanic, Latino, Asian consumers.
As a livestock economist, one of the things I think is interesting about lamb, from professionally speaking, up beyond just eating it because I like it, we have such a holiday driven demand, and here we are when we're taping this, we are a month away from Easter, and that's traditionally a big consumption point or a holiday driven demand. It's not the only holiday, but I think that's certainly part of prices right now, is we're right on the cusp of the first big holiday for lamb consumption. I think that's an important thing in the market too, that more of a traditional holiday versus what the non-traditional market that you talked about, Andrew.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Andrew? I think it's really fascinating. I've recently gotten involved in tracking some of those prices and volumes through San Angelo, and it's just a really interesting market to watch. I've been fascinated to learn a little bit more. All right, well, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank y'all for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next video.